All right, here we go. Now I got everything we need. So you could just write right in your, like on your task cards. I had just written on in the last class, and I don't want to waste another packet. So I'm just going to write on a piece of paper below. But if you, however you want to organize it, go for it. So numbers 1 through 8 are all pretty similar to each other. Hold on, let me just get this a little bigger for the people here. There you go. They're pretty similar to each other. Basically, you're going through and you're saying, where are my zeros? How do I write that in factored form? Okay, so that's not that bad. One thing we do want to pay attention to is end behavior. So like, is the leading coefficient positive or negative? You don't actually have to find it, but you just have to put a plus or a minus or positive or negative at the beginning. So let's do the first one. Once again, I'm sorry in advance. I don't know if you know this. The printers aren't the best here, so we just do the best with what we got. And some of these have pretty like small scales. So if you can't read something, just let me know. I put a digital copy up as well, but even when you zoom in on that, it kind of stinks. But I have a different digital copy that's a little easier to read, so I can help you out if you need any help, just because you can't read something. But here's what we're gonna do. We're going to go through and find our zeros. So I see them at -2, at -1, at 0, at 1, and at 2. Okay, so I know where they are. I will tell you what I do because it annoyed me like 3 times because this happened to me when I was doing the problem set answer key. I always start from left to right? Like that's how we read. The one thing that just annoys the crud out of me is I start to write my factored form, and then that 0 is thrown in, and for a 0 you just write X, and that looks ugly. So I always look if there's a 0 through the 0 first, and I throw that X there. Now let's go from left to right, and we'll look and see if we remember stuff about multiplicity. So I see a 0 at -2. Remind ourselves, we do the opposite sign when we write the factored. Hey, it's bouncing off of -2. What's the multiplicity? Bounce. No, 3 wasn't bounce. It's 2. Okay, so if you see the bounce, so you have to kind of look at how it's hitting it. So it's going to 2, it's approaching it, and bounces off. That means the multiplicity here is 2. Okay, I am just going to move from left to right. Then we have a 0 through -1. So I'm going to write that as X plus 1. It just goes through that point. Nothing fancy is happening. So that just means the multiplicity is 1. You don't need to write a 1. We assume it's there. But once again, if it just goes through a point, the multiplicity is 1. Then we went over to 0. I had already kind of represented it with X because it always annoys me if I put it in the middle of a fraction. And it's just going through it once again. So the multiplicity of that is also 1. And then let's see what else we got. We have a 0 at 1, which we would write as X minus 1. It looks like it's just going through, so we're good there. And then we have another 0 at X minus 2. And it's going through it, but it's flattening. So if it kind of flattens through that 0, what's the multiplicity? A 3. So you're just kind of looking. And you do need to remember, or you need to refer back to your notes and say, okay, well, what did how is it hitting it? Is it going through it? Is it bouncing? Is it flattening? And once again, when it says a minimum degree, it's because we're just doing our best. We're just looking at sketches. Technically, there could be all sorts of other fancy stuff going on. We're just going to go with what we see right now. That's about it. So nothing too crazy for the first few. Just check your end behavior. This is up, which means that this leading coefficient or just whatever is in front of here is positive, so you're good. But just pay attention if something does flip, you would have to put a negative if it was a negative coefficient. So that's that. Oh, Mrs. Sherman didn't do a very good job of writing here. Okay, well, I'll just kind of show you number 3. It's already done out because I did it in my last class, but I just wanted to point out to you. What I did, this is one with the end behavior, so I just wanted to show you how it affected my graph. I went through and found the zeros. Okay, I did exactly what I just did. We had a 0 at 0, so that's what the X is. And went through it, so the multiplicity is just 1. We had a 0 at 2, so that's where the X minus 2. It bounced off of, so that's where the squared came from. And we had a 0 at X minus 3, so it went through 3, and it just goes straight through it. So I was feeling pretty good about that. The main thing you do have to recognize is since this is down, down, you would have to go, that's where this negative comes from. It's just seeing that the end behavior was flipped. So in that case, you would have to go back and put a negative. So pay attention to the end behavior. For now, for these first few, it's, it's either positive because it's, up, up. But if you see that it does flip to down, down or down, up.
What if it's down, up?
Down, up is a positive coefficient. Up, down is negative. You have a little chart in your notes too.
Down, up is positive.
Down, up's positive, yeah. It's so confusing. It's like down, I don't know. Saying down too many times, you guys don't freak out. So 1 through 8 are kind of similar to those. So those ones are pretty quick. You're literally just looking for zeros. Once again, if you can't read something, let me know. And doing your best from there. It's when we get to one like number 9 that we see a little difference. So let me show you how to do this one. It's actually, you actually already technically know how to do it, but we'll bring it into the polynomial stage here. Find the factor form of a polynomial. Well, we can do that because that's what we've been doing. Okay, great. Ooh, this one we want a leading coefficient of A with the minimum degree represented by the graph. And it tells us that it passes through a specific point. So here's how we do this. I'm just going to kind of do it on my piece of paper so I have enough room. It might take a little bit of room. You can do it off to the side. I don't care. Whatever works for you works for me. The first thing we're going to do is find our zeros and write our factor form. So what's that? A 0 at, what does that even say? -2. Okay. So that would be x plus 2. It looks like it's flattening on that. So I'm going to say to the third power. And then we come over here and we have a 0 right here at x minus 2. And that bounces, so that would be squared. So that would be my equation. But it's saying in this one, we want to find out what A is. So A is just like that coefficient in front. So we've done this process before with quadratics, but let's just remind ourselves what we do. If we are given a point like 0.64, we know an x and a y, a specific x and y. So what we can do is plug this x and y into my equation over here, and then I'll be able to solve for A. So we would get 64, because that's our y from right here, equals A times 0 plus 2 cubed, 0 minus 2 squared. Okay, so you can see what we're doing. We write our factor form, just like we did in 1 through 8. The difference now is it wants us to find A. In order to find A, we're going to use the points that was given to us as x and y, and we're going to plug those in. So now A is our only variable left. Then we just have a little bit of simplifying here. So when I get to this first set of parentheses, 0 plus 2 is 2. 2 cubed is 8. And then 0 minus 2 is -2 squared is 4. 8 times 4 is 32. So A would just come out to be 2, right? Oh, sorry, you can't even see my work. There we go. That usually helps, Mr. Sherman. Then always make sure, write the equation. Y equals, that's our leading coefficient, and then we have our factored form. And then you check, do I have to do anything for the end behavior? Down, up is positive, is a positive leading coefficient. So we leave that as +2, and that would be my final answer. So we had done that with quadratics. At one point we were filling in x and y and something else, and we were solving for a missing variable. Same thing goes. Write your factor form first, use your x, y of your points, and that gives you your A. Always check your end behavior from there and say, should that leading A be positive or should I throw a negative with it? Like hint, number 10, when you find A, it's going to have to be negative because that's a down, down, and that's a negative leading coefficient. So as I kind of scroll through these, 1 through 8 are all kind of similar to the first one we did. You're basically just writing in factor form, and there's nothing too fancy going on, so you don't need to do that extra stuff. So you write in the factor form, but do check your end behavior. Should it just be a positive or negative in front? Positive, negative. Once you get to 8, or excuse me, 9. Sorry, I'm doing a bad job of flipping right now. Yeah, it's like everything. It's like the way it was printed, and like you, technically they shouldn't be back to back, but we were trying to save paper just for environment. So numbers 9 through 16 do have that extra step where you are finding that leading coefficient of A, and it gives you a point to use to do that. But you need to do what you did for the first few first. So you need to find the zeros, write factor form, and then you can plug into that. But pay attention to those good old end behavior. Things like down, 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 up, down. Those are all going to have negatives in front of them. Down, up would be positive. So if you are not yet used to the end behaviors, then